Here we go. We are live here, episode 7 of the MMA Debate Show. I'm joined here today by Alexander K. Lee. Thanks so much for joining me, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, Lucas. Very excited to be here.
For sure. Let the people know, where do you work here in this MMA industry, and where can we find you on social media?
I am currently with MMA Fighting. I'm with a great team at MMA Fighting, which you can find, of course, at MMAfighting.com. And you can find me on Twitter at Alexander K. Lee, I think. Yes, at Alexander K. Lee. There's a lot of Alex Lees out there, people, so don't get the wrong one. That's the real Alex Lee, at Alexander K. Lee on Twitter. And Instagram I don't really use for work, so just stick with the Twitter.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so we got a bunch of stuff to get to. We saw a fight week that was a little bit crazy in the past with Thiago Sanchez and everything. We've got the fight coming up in New Zealand, all that kind of stuff. But first of all, I want to start with a topic that's a little bit, a little bit tame compared to what we're going to get to. It's Thiago Santos says he was offered an opponent outside of the top 10 of his division, turned it down. Well, let's start with you. What was your reaction to it, and was this the right move for Thiago Santos?
No, I think it's, I think I'll say this. I'm definitely a critic of the UFC throwing guys either into, guys who are coming off losses back into tough fights too quickly, or throwing prospects into, throwing prospects up the rankings too quickly. And I know people, especially MMA fans, are loath to do anything like boxing. But I think one thing boxing does really well is building up guys, giving them a lot of tune-up fights and, when they need it. So it sounds like the UFC did the right thing here and may have offered, not that there's any easy fights in the UFC, but offered Thiago what was something like a tune-up fight. And he said, no, I get it. At his age, he's thinking nothing but big names. He's thinking he wants fights that'll draw eyeballs, bring attention, bring the most money. But I'd really like to see him, I think, facing someone outside of the top 10 or top 15 would have been perfect. Get himself a big win, get a big knockout, make sure everything's working after those knee surgeries, and get himself right back in that title picture. One win, that's all he would need.
I'll be honest with you, I differ with you a little bit on this one. If Thiago Santos had lost that fight against Jon Jones in really convincing fashion, like say he'd gotten flatlined or something like that, and then you're like, all right, let's give him a tune-up fight. For me, that makes sense. My issue with Thiago Santos taking a fight outside the top 10 is considering just how close he is to the title shot. I mean, there are people talking about him fighting Dominic Reyes next in order, winner gets the rematch. People are like, you know what, Thiago should have gotten a rematch, should still get a rematch. So for me, when you're that close to the title shot, you could risk a lot by taking a fight outside of the top 10. So I understand what you're saying in theory, like, get the knockout, get your name back out there. But for me, considering, like you mentioned, his age, where he's at in his career, and considering just how close he is to the title shot, I don't want to say it's a mistake, but for me, I don't think that would have been the right career move for him at this point.
Lucas, we just started. We're already disagreeing. This is off to a terrible start. Oh, I guess it's
that's what the people want to see.
It's true. It's a debate show. You're right. It's a debate show, right. not a let's all say the same thing show. But and I get it. I get there's the concern. There's the worst case scenario. He loses, and then we never get to see that rematch. And of course, we all want to see it because he did present a strong challenge to Jon Jones. Now, I don't know if I'm not of the party that thinks that he beat Jon Jones. I actually did have Jones winning that fight. It was not the most eventful battle, so I understand why it's tempting to sort of lean towards the challenger. And again, I think Santos did a good job. But again, if you're that good, I know a lot of crazy stuff can happen, but if you're that good and you deserve a rematch, I do think then there's no harm in taking another fight. Again, especially if they were trying to give him someone a favorable matchup, which we don't know exactly who it was, but if that's the case, I think he should have taken it. And I still think we will see. But you're right. It makes sense for him to wait, and then wait to see if we can get that rematch, no matter what.
What I do agree with is I didn't have Thiago Santos winning that fight either. So for me, we could see an immediate rematch, see the argument for it, but him taking another fight, like I mentioned, people were saying Dominic Reyes. But you said in case something happens, if you were to fight someone outside of the top 10, let me throw a name out there at you, Eric Spicely. It's happened to Thiago Santos before. And that's where I would say, that's where I'd be a little bit worried for him, because it has happened to him, and we saw it bite him in the ass in that one. So, for me, considering just how close he is to the title, if something were to happen, and especially considering the injuries, we don't even know how he's going to look when he comes back, if he's going to be the same fighter. So for me, it's about, you got to maximize this opportunity that you have right in front of you. And in the words of Stephen A. Smith, let me be very, very clear.
Oh, gosh. Oh, no.
I'm not going to start yelling at everybody.
Oh, no.
No, but for me, Thiago Santos, it's a business decision. And think of the pay if you fight someone outside of the top 10. And even if you get starched, just how bad it is. For me, the negatives don't outweigh the positives to get this fight.
Yeah, I'm just imagining some horrible situation where he gets Von Prude by Oven St. Preux or something like that,
Yeah.
or I don't go maybe like an Ed Herman or something like that. He gets knocked up. Like you're right. I mean, these things can happen. Again, I'm in favor of more tune-up fights. In general, not just in this situation, but for sure, I can see what him and his team are thinking and why they'd want to avoid a scenario like that.
Yeah, I mean, I do agree with that. What I would say, though, to kind of be on your side a little bit, for me, the Dominic Reyes fight is a little bit, it's way too up there, number one contender spot. And the thing that worries me, though, is his injuries. I think he hurt both his legs. Some people are saying he's in a wheelchair and stuff like that. If you come back and you're a shadow of your former self, and we saw what Dominic Reyes did out there, that could end very badly. But at the same time, for me, fighting an OSP or an Ed Herman, that's not the way to go either.
It's true. I will say this is strictly speaking from from the fan part of me that's still alive and well. I mean, a Dominic Reyes Thiago Santos fight would be amazing, but right. Yes, it would essentially knock one of those guys out of title contention for the near future, and for an older guy like Maheta, possibly forever. So I understand why people don't want to see that fight. That's really the selfish, like, oh, what a great fight on paper that would be. I also just wish that we weren't so. When it comes to fighting, once you reach a certain level, that people weren't so critical of fighters who lose. Like Thiago Santos, if he lost to Reyes and then bounced back with a cool KO of another, let's say top 10, top 15 guy, I'd say give him the rematch anyway. I don't care about now he's 1-2 in his last 3. It's like, well, do you want to see him fight John Jones again or not? That's it. That's what matters, right? And then if he gets a win, gets back in there. So I'm a little more loosey-goosey with wins and losses and rankings, but that's me.
All right, let's leave it on this. If you're the matchmaker, you get to decide the fight that happens. No politics, no nothing. If you say it's happening, it's happening. Who do you matchmake next with Thiago Santos?
Like I said, I like Reyes. I know it's going to kill. It's going to really, really hurt one of their options as far as getting a future title shot. But again, I have faith in both guys that they will still have enough success over the next 18 months, whatever the stretch is. Again, a little bit tougher for Maheta. That they could still both get that title shot. And it also depends on whether John Jones, if he's sticking around, what he decides to do. If something else crazy happens on light heavyweight, it's so hard to say. So, like I said, for me, that's the fight I would make happen. But I understand why neither Maheta or Dominic Reyes would want to do it.
Yeah, for me, it would be Dominic Reyes or Volkan Ozdemir. I feel like either win can, catapult you towards that title shot. All right, so good stuff there on that topic. Let's move on to something a little bit more controversial that had the Twitter people talking, whether you want to put any stock on it or not. Thiago Sanchez had a fight this weekend. Had quite something. People are asking, did he quit? What did we see out there? You can't say that he quit. Stephen A. Smith, all that stuff. As soon as you talk about a fighter quitting. So what do we see out there? Is this a case of Thiago Sanchez quit, or is that not the right word? What did we see out there from Thiago Sanchez? Lucas,
you get one more Stephen A. Smith mention before I'm hanging up. I loathe the man. I respect he's a hardworking guy. He puts in that work for ESPN. He gets those ratings. He gets the clicks. He gets whatever it is that the people measure. I'm not a Stephen A. Smith fan. I don't know the man personally, but
let me be very, very clear when I say that.
Careful,
no, what I mean,
careful,
treading lightly. What I mean is we saw him make comments about Cowboy quitting, and everybody jumped on like, you can't say a fighter quit. So that's the only thing I mean there. No Stephen A. Smith fan here. Think you should stay away from MMA, stick with NBA, good stuff over there, more or less.
Not even. Honestly, that's when I started hating him. That's my beef. I won't go into a rant, but I'll say my beef with him is I don't even care that he doesn't know about MMA. I don't think he knows about any sport, but anyway. What was the original question again, Lucas? I'm sorry, I got sidetracked.
So, did Thiago Sanchez quit?
Yeah. Oh, did he quit? I hate that word, especially referring to. I hate that word for any fighter, especially referring to someone like Thiago Sanchez, who has given so much to the sport. I know it's cliche, and it's what a lot of defenders of Diego have been saying all week. He's given so much to the sport. He's bled for the sport. Blah blah. But it's true. If that cliche is true for anyone, it's certainly true for Diego. Now, do I think I'll say this. I think he did the smart thing. And I think he was aware of the situation. I think he was put in a weird situation by referee Jason Herzog, very fine official. But it was weird how long that conversation was and how much of it we caught on the broadcast, right? Like it really did sound like he was giving Diego the option, saying, "Hey, man," and I'm sure he's ref Diego fights before, so they must know each other. Something to the effect of, "Hey," and I'm not saying they're friends. I'm just saying they're familiar enough they can have this conversation. If you quit now, it'll be a disqualification and you'll win. I don't think that's what he said explicitly, but I think a lot of us watching it, that's kind of the vibe we got. So really, what is Diego supposed to do in that situation? I think he's aware he was losing the fight. Maybe not based on comments we've seen afterwards where he seems to think that he was a wizard or a ninja or something like that. But I think in the moment that he was certainly aware of what he was doing, and yes, he chose the disqualification win. Not his fault. Michel Pereira, God bless him, incredible fighter, effed up. Are we I'm assuming we're a PG show. I assume your show's for the kids, Lucas.
I don't know, man. We can say fuck,
no,
boobs.
no.
You just say it, man.
My freaking ears. But no,
excuse me.
Look, Pereira is the one who screwed up. Okay, and I love Michel Pereira, but he screwed up. He threw the knee. He's the one who should be criticized. I get what people are saying about Diego, but the fault is not his. And he did the smart thing, got his extra money, and got back in the win column, and maybe saved his job.
Let me just say this: I do think Diego Sanchez quit. However, I think when you say quit, people have like such a negative thing, like they imagine him, bloody, tapping out, like it's right. Me. That's not what happened. I mean, but for me, and it's especially weird to say this for Diego, because I feel like when you think of the one guy who's never going to quit, I mean, you think of the guy who had that enormous bite mark in the BJ Penn fight. You think of, when you say never quit, you think of Diego Sanchez covered in blood, doing this crazy stuff, But in this one, I think I don't want to say took the easy way out, because, getting pelted by Michel Pereira for 2 rounds is definitely not the easy way out. But for me, he saw an opportunity to take the win. And like you mentioned, it's the smart decision. I don't fault him for it. I do think he quit, but it's not something that I would hold against you. I mean, it's a fight that you're losing. I think they said that he didn't cut weight. Michel, we saw how enormous he was out there. So for me, this was a case of him quitting. And the main thing that makes him say that is when he asked the referee, and I believe this was the quote, he said, if I stop, or if the fight gets stopped, do I win it? And, when you start saying that, for me, that's when you can sort of, I hate to say he quit, but for me, that's what we saw out there.
Sure.
He took the way out, and it was a veteran move. It was the smart move. I don't hold him against him, but for me, that's what we saw out there.
Yeah, I think, look, Diego gets criticized for being a tunnel visioned warrior. We all make jokes about it. How like you can say I'm trying to be diplomatic here and not use a mean word to describe his fight IQ, but people have criticized him for years. Now he does a smart thing, maybe not a thing that's very appealing to fans, not good for entertainment purposes. And now people are piling on the other way. It's I don't want to say you can't win, because I don't think it's the same people who are criticizing him now who have criticized him before. It's probably his different camps, but it does feel like he's between a rock and a hard place as far as decision making goes. Because I feel like he saved himself from at least a little more damage that wasn't going anywhere good. He might have taken another knee, if the fight had continued and Pereira had got him up against the cage. So I mentioned this on Twitter, Lucas. I never thought we'd see the day where Donald Cowboy Cerrone and Diego Sanchez would be questioned as far as their toughness and legitimacy. And yet here we are. That is the nature of this business. I'm sure they know what they signed up for, but man, that is pretty wild, eh?
And speaking of putting stuff on Twitter, somebody put something, I don't remember who it was, but they said the only reason we weren't happy that Diego won is that his yoga guru, or whatever his coach's official title is, gets a piece of that money. And when I thought it, I was like, damn, I hate it too. But we'll get into his coach. I mean,
are we going to talk about Joshua Fabian? Okay.
We'll have to. The guy's decided to do media to justify himself. We'll come after you.
Yes. Yeah, he's been on fire today.
Have you heard any of the interviews?
I've not heard the Luke Thomas interview, which as of this recording could still be ongoing now.
Right.
But I did read Josh Gross's excellent Q&A at The Athletic, which features about 5 questions from Josh and about 2,000 words from Fabia. So if anyone who hasn't read that and you're subscribed to The Athletic, I would definitely recommend you check that out.
Yeah, no, I was doing an interview, and before there, people were kind of live tweeting what he was doing, Luke, and I was like, all right, cool. I finished the interview, and I go back on there, and he's still talking. I was like, all right, well, that's wow. And that's it. When you have somebody that talks that much, you start to question a little bit the mental, if we weren't already.
Yeah, I'll just say we've reached out to him, so I'll say also keep your eye out on MMA Fighting. We hopefully will have something with him soon. He seems to enjoy talking, so I don't know if he's that hard to get. But Joshua Fabia, that's certainly a name that has entered the MMA lexicon this week.
Let me just say this: whoever has to transcribe that interview with him, I'm so sorry. I mean, even transcribing anything is awful, but that much that's a week or a month project.
Yeah,
right there.
Yeah.
But to come back to Diego Sanchez, I guess we forgot about that one. But listen, he doesn't owe anybody anything when he's out in that cage. I mean, it's just you out there. He doesn't seem to me like someone that really cares that much about whether the fans approve of him or not. That being said, I guess he was going all over social media trying to justify himself, but. When you're out there in that cage, you've got this enormous opponent and he's styling on you and being a little bit disrespectful. When you got guys throwing flips out there and elbows coming from everywhere, you can take that however you want. But for me, he doesn't know anybody out there. Your win bonuses on the line and things like that. So for me, that was the right decision for him. But once again, for me, he did quit, but I'm not going to hold it against him. And I don't think anybody should either.
You know what would have been a great decision for him, and I say this, of course, classic, keyboard warrior, not in the cage with a friggin' guy like Michel Pereira, who looks like he was twice Diego's size. A few takedowns would have been nice. A few takedowns, I just would have early on. A few takedowns early on. He does not look like an easy guy to take down. He's very agile, very hard to catch, and I'm sure even just getting your hands on him is difficult. But it's funny. I think a lot of us who picked Diego, I picked Diego to win, thought that he would just follow kind of the Tristan Connolly method of weathering the early storm, and there was a more mature Demolador for sure, but I thought Diego would push the pace a little bit more and maybe try and tire him out, but again, once that fight starts, it's all up in the air, and both guys showed very different strategies than expected. So
yeah, it's too bad he doesn't go to the ground more. I think the fight where I was really impressed and I was like, okay, he still got it, at least on the ground, was, I think it was against Marcin Held.
Sure.
And he went, and Marcin was known for being this great guy on the ground, and we saw Diego go in there, flipping himself into a pretzel and everything like it was nothing. And it's like, you know what, maybe on the feet you might not be able to take damage like you could, but man, if you still want to go out there, you want to compete, and maybe you see yourself as a contender or whatever it is, why not go to your strengths? I mean, why go out there and stay on the feet with someone that is going to be throwing tornadoes at you? I mean, like you mentioned, for me, the ground game, it is something that he sort of seems to be moving away from as he gets older, but I think that's a mistake, especially because you're not, unless you get mounted and you're getting elbows rained on, but you're probably not going to take as much damage, on the ground as you would on the feet.
Yeah, and Mickey Gall, another bigger guy that he outlasted and outgrappled. Did you watch the video that Diego put up today, the 12-minute video, which I assume was made by Fabia? I cannot confirm that, but it looked like it might have been made by his coach, or at least someone from the coaches who works for the coach. Did you see that video? It's this 12-minute breakdown. I mean, I won't describe it. It was all just it was the entire fight in slow motion. So I'm expecting them to get a copyright claim from the UFC to take that bad boy down. And it's just showing all the blocks, all the shots he blocked. There was no offense shown, just kind of what he blocked. I'm like, okay, this is interesting. So the whole point is, that they're trying to say they reinvented him as this evasive stand-up master, and he no longer takes damage in his fights since working with this new coach. And I'm like, I don't know how true that is, but
how convenient.
Yes. So check that out, everyone. I guess it's on Diego's Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, you did a very good job selling it. I mean, it really makes me want to just drop everything and go watch it. But
it's something else.
While we're on the subject of Diego, we'll get into whether he should retire or not. But first, let's go off on his coach a little bit. What should be done to prevent these sort of yoga, meditation, riding on an elephant with a diamond on the head? What do we have to do to?
Whoa, Lucas, you better be careful. Oh, so you didn't read this interview, Lucas? You better be careful. This dude is fired up. He is all the stuff you just said. The stuff you just said. He's telling everybody he is not that. All right. This guy is for real. This guy apparently, and again, I'm going on his. This is strictly one side. This is his account. This guy is trusted by governments to train security. Okay. There's that video of him that was put out by Bohachinia Depot or whatever his name is, and then pushing people around with his finger. His finger, just manipulating their body. It was just crazy. So he's very upset with us in the so-called MMA media. So I'm just saying, be careful with all that, lumping him in there with like the Ido Portals and all the other. I'm just saying, when you see some more clips from this interview, this dude, he's not having it with us. I've never even said anything or written anything about the guy until now, and apparently I'm lumped in there, and I'm an effing idiot. That's a quote from him. So.
Wow, you should be honored.
That was for all of us. Apparently. So, I don't know what to say about this guy. He seems dangerous. That's all I'll say.
So treading very lightly. Maybe he wouldn't be the best choice to coach an MMA fighter. And what should be done, or what could be done to prevent people that aren't quite as qualified as maybe some other coaches, take advantage of these fighters.
Man, it's hard to say. I mean, look, I work with Jose Youngs and Pete Carroll, God bless them, and they're right up. They're full on this. I'm sorry if I'm using this my opportunity to rant to my coworkers. They're full on this crystal. Jared Cannoniers with the crystal. Brian Kelleher, some other people. Crystal Team Crystal, whatever this whole crap is. It's right up there with Gwyneth Paltrow's Goop. It's like, I don't know what you guys are doing, but at the same time, I'm not a high level athlete. Once you reach this point, people say whatever gives you that mental edge. Go all in on it, right? That's what you should do. So if Diego, who's 38 years old now, if he really thinks that this guy has helped to turn his career around, and for people who don't know, by the way, he went with a one-person team that week. It was just him and this coach Fabia. and only one guy in the corner. So he clearly is fully invested all in on this guy. Like I said, I think it's dangerous. I'm not Diego. Maybe he is getting something positive out of this guy. I think he paired up with him before the Gall fight. So technically he's 2-1 under. Yeah. If you want to just look at the numbers, he's 2-1 under Fabio. So I don't know if we need to push these guys out, because I think a lot of fighters are welcoming it. So it's not up to us, unfortunately.
The biggest thing for me is that, if you work with a guy like that, okay, maybe, but when you work with just the one guy who I guess pushes people with his fingers because they're really strong, that's where I start to get worried, and that's where you think it's dangerous. People are like, oh, the UFC needs to step in. The way the UFC looks at it is you don't even have to prepare for the fight. In their eyes, it's literally show up on weight and then go fight. That's their business. How you prepare for it, just like the weight cutting stuff, that's stuff that the fighter's doing. That's not anybody telling them to do it. So in terms of the UFC doing something, not really. But, what can anybody do? I have no idea, unless you really have someone that's going to sit down and be like, hey, Diego, maybe we keep the guy if you like him, but how about we introduce maybe two guys who know what they're talking about? People were kind of comparing him to Touch Butt in the Park with Ido Portal.
Of course.
At the same time, he was a part of a team. And the movement stuff, okay, it's a little bit funky. It made for some really good memes, so we can appreciate that. But John was still there. Owen was still there. Like Connor's whole team was there, and he added this as a supplement. Maybe it brought him an advantage, maybe it didn't, but it wasn't dangerous in the sense that he's going out there with a guy who does yoga in the middle of a park, and then we hope for the best. In Diego's case, really, I dropped everybody. Jackson Wink, who's a very good team, I'm going to drop them, and I'm going to go with this yoga instructor. That's for me where it gets dangerous. I don't mind it if he's a part of your team, a supplement, mental edge, whatever you want to say. But if it's by himself, that's where it starts to get worrying.
I am going to. I hope he has. I don't know if he has Twitter. I've seen his Instagram, and not that many followers, by the way. If this guy coach has Twitter, I am snitch tagging you, Lucas, because you have called him a yoga instructor like multiple times. I think he's expressly said he is. That is one of many facets of his abilities, I believe, something to that effect. So you better, Lucas, you better be careful, man. You better watch out if you go to a live event. You see this guy there. Because he's going to take it out on some, because he might, based on his interviews, he might be the deadliest man in the world. So I'm just, and you saw what he can do with one finger. Imagine what we could do with like 3 fingers.
No, I'll call Steven Seagal and he'll protect me. We'll figure it out. There are ways around this.
UFC's got to work on that matchup. That's the matchup we should be talking about.
Yeah, for sure. Just leave it with this. What can we do? Should something be done about it? And if so, what can we do, if anything?
Certainly not by the UFC. It's the same argument that comes up when people say, well, why does the UFC, not train its own judges? Why do they not handle more of the take some things out of the hands of the commissions? And it's like, well, I mean, imagine the controversy of a John Jones Reyes, how much bigger it would be if they had a similar result, and you knew that the judges were hired by the UFC or trained by the UFC. Right. Same thing with coaches. If the UFC steps in and shows favor, or the opposite, they recommend some coaches to a fighter, and then that fighter starts losing, then it's on the UFC's fault. They really are just wise to avoid a liability in the situation. So unfortunately, as you said, there's really not a lot they can do. They have to it's in their best interest to let the fighters just deal with the sort of thing themselves.
Just to end it on this, the only thing that the UFC can really do, I guess, is cut Diego. I mean, for me, that would be that. I mean, that would be the only thing. But I guess if his yoga instructor can use his magic to prevent a cut, then that would nullify that. But
hey, yeah, he's 2-1. 2-1. Oh, sorry, 3-1 in his last 4.
Dear
so he's like closer to title contention than he is to being released. So watch out.
I mean, if he was a heavyweight, I would believe you, but this is welterweight, lightweight, wherever he wants to be. So maybe not. All right. To keep it with Diego, one last thing on Diego. Is it time for him to call it a career? Is it time to talk retirement? Or you mentioned his record. Should he continue chugging along?
Oh, gosh. Look, if you asked me, I would have said this guy should have called it a career 2 or 3 years ago. And not because he can't fight anymore, just because of how much we've seen of him. And you don't need to be a doctor to kind of imagine the amount of damage that this guy's taken. One, just to his body, and of course the always difficult to gauge, damage that he may have taken to his brain. And this isn't even making fun of his eccentric personality. This is just really anyone who has taken as many punches as he has throughout his career, punches, head kicks, even just hard grappling on the ground, that kind of stuff. That's all this concussive force on his head. I love watching Diego fight. I'm very grateful for everything that he's done for the sport. But yeah, if I don't know him personally, but if I did, I would certainly be one to step forward and say, maybe you want to consider retiring. Like I said, he's 30 years old. I think he turns 30. Oh, he doesn't turn 39 until the end of this year, but still, he's pretty much 50 in fight years. So is it time for him to retire? I mean, you could ask me this question 6 months from now. You could ask me this question 6 months ago, and I would have said the same thing. Yeah, it's time for him to retire. So I don't know. Obviously, he doesn't want to go out like this, but Diego, whenever it's time for you to go, I don't think anyone of us in the media will protest.
Here we got Tim Bissell asking a great question. So I'm gonna pause real quick. If you could play touch butt in the park with anyone, who would it be? Excellent question.
Oh my goodness. Touch butt is such a beautiful activity, isn't it?
Oh, the flow.
I think, you know who would be fun, because I think he definitely wouldn't take it. I think Derek Lewis would be a blast to play touch butt with in the park. Though again, you know, now that I've brought it up, I think a lot of people got that visual of Derek Lewis chasing people around, maybe a couple of pool noodles. I don't know.
100%.
Yeah, and but again, I think he'd be a fun guy. I think he'd be a good guy to do it with. Hopefully, wouldn't take it too seriously and wouldn't get too mad if you got the better of him. It's not. I'm talking about touch butt like it's a game or a competition, but. Tim Bissell, I'm going to see this guy later this week. We're fellow GTA residents, so I'll see him later this week, and I'm going to admonish him for asking such a ridiculous question.
And we saw something on Twitter about how you and Derek Lewis look very much alike, virtually identical. So it'd be tough for people to see two Derek Lewises out there doing
this. Is true. Yeah, it's confusing. It'd be confused. That's probably the reason why it came to my head first, is the stunning similarity between myself and Derek Lewis. Yeah.
100%. If I had to pick somebody, I guess Nate Diaz. I mean, he came up with the touch butt in the park, and could you imagine doing it with him? I mean, you know, Stockton, and he'd probably yell at people and try to convince me to go vegan. So I think touch butt in the park with the original title giver of touch butt in the park, Nate Diaz, or Nick Diaz. I mean, whichever one. You know, I think it'd be a lot of fun to touch butt in the park with them.
This is someone. Please, nobody clip this. Bohechina Depot, if you're out there, leave this alone.
All right, coming back to the question of should Diego retire, I don't see how I can argue with him to continue going, aside from, I guess, if you look at his record and he's 3-1 with his yoga instructor. But yeah, for me, it's time for him to retire. You know, you mentioned the mental thing. He does have an eccentric personality. If you watch the first season of The Ultimate Fighter, he was always a weird dude. I mean, you know, he was I'm trying to remember what the vegetable was in the blender, but he was getting yelled at by Stephen Bonner for, I think it's like an asparagus or something in the blender. I remember what it was, something weird like that. So he was always a weird dude, but at this point, it's gotten to the point where he does an interview and you're like, does he hear the questions that we're asking him? I mean, and he's pulling out props and everything. You're like, does he hear, you know, the interviewer, or does he hear the voices in his head? So mentally, I am worried about him. You know, physically, I mean, I guess he could still do it, but at this point, you're fighting at welterweight because you don't want to cut weight anymore. You're going to be fighting dudes that are so much bigger than you. I don't see what's the point in him continuing. I mean, I think he got paid $100K, or somebody said that. I don't know if it's official or not. But if you're getting paid $100K to, you know, take a DQ like that, why not? I guess the pay would be the only reason to stick around. But from a human perspective, you know, bringing out the fan in me, I definitely don't see what would be the point of him going out there and taking that extra damage.
Yeah, in a perfect world, I mean, $100K sounds like a lot. It is a lot. It's certainly good pay for an athlete. But for a guy who's been competing as long as Diego, in a perfect world, he would have been making a lot more money, a lot of, like, a while ago, and he would have been able to, if he even wants to, but at least had the option to retire comfortably. Because again, I don't know his financial situation, but of course, I imagine the money has a lot to do with why him and many of these fighters continue fighting. So a better compensation would lead to earlier retirements. I know fans might not want that. They might want some of these guys to stick around, but I can just say, speaking for myself, I don't mind the idea of some of these guys competing at a peak level for like 7 or 8 years and then, you know, riding off into the sunset. Someone else will come along.
Right. So another subject, a wild card subject, I try to have some a little bit out there, you know, not aside from Thiago Sanchez.
Besides the last question by the inappropriate question by Tim Bissell. Okay, good. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, good for him for bringing on a good wild card one.
Awkward.
But we saw a pay-per-view where people talk a lot about the commentators, and the question becomes, is it time for the UFC to move on from Joe Rogan?
Man, you know, didn't it feel like he was ready to move on from them like 2 years ago?
Yeah.
But then I guess they kind of gave him that sweet deal where they were like, hey, Joe, guess what? Pay-per-views only. And I assume the money's probably close to the same. And he's like, yeah, so I do that. I do my podcast, my massively popular podcast. Yeah. I do my comedy appearances. And he still gets, you know, front row, best seat in the house tickets to the biggest fights of the year. So is it time for them to move on from him? Gosh, you know, I think he's such a major part of their their brand. You know, I still think he's so strongly associated with them. How much does that matter anymore in the ESPN era, which has changed the whole dynamic of viewership and buys and things like that. Maybe it doesn't matter anymore. And he has been off quite a bit lately. I don't know if people are just noticing it more or if he actually is off more, but he does seem to be falling into his, that trap of sometimes he seems to be favoring one fighter, or at least one narrative over the other. And of course the classic, he just seems to kind of misread situations in the fight, like when the fight seems to be over or when he thinks it's not going to be over, and then the exact opposite happens. So I do think he's lost his fastball a little bit, but there's a lot of sports broadcasters who have lost their fastball in other sports who have stuck around much longer than Joe Rogan. So I'm going to say no, they don't need to move on from him. Can they? Yes. Do they need to? No, I think he could stick around for another 5 or 6 years. I don't think it would hurt the product.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think they should stick with Joe Rogan. I mean, the thing is, he's doing what, maybe 12, 13 cards a year if he's only doing pay-per-views. If he was doing every card, and every card you're starting to see that maybe he's losing focus or saying things, and you're like, okay, but he's doing pay-per-views. And for me, it's about, I guess, matching him up with the right commentary team. We see that him and Dominic Cruz is going to be them bickering over half of the stuff, and that's the nature of both. And maybe some people enjoy it, maybe some people don't. But if you put him with John Anik, Daniel Cormier, I mean, it can still make for good stuff. And I think for me, I look at Joe Rogan a little bit more like a commentator, maybe for casual fans. Like, I feel like you get to a point in MMA where you don't necessarily need the commentator. I think a lot of people can sort of understand what they're watching, but Joe Rogan, he's still a good ambassador. He has an enormous podcast. I think he's like #1 podcaster in the world. So, you definitely want to keep a big name like that around. I don't know that anyone's tuning in for a pay-per-view because, hey, we get to hear Joe Rogan some more after hearing him for 16 hours this week. Sort of similar to Stephen A. Smith, where people are like, oh, they'll tune in to see Stephen. That's not how it works. But, Joe Rogan, he's not hurting anybody. I think the only people really criticizing him are the hardcore. So for me, definitely keep him. If he was doing every single card, I would say, okay, maybe it's time to do something. But, Joe Rogan, he's got a good voice for the broadcast. He's one of those guys you think of. They got rid of Mike Goldberg, which was a step in the right direction, but I don't think it's time to, completely erase both of them.
Yeah, look, whatever criticisms people have of Rogan now, you probably had some variation of that criticism again 10 years ago, right? Right. He's been kind of the same guy, and again, if anything, he's probably paid less. I think he's even said himself, the product is harder to keep track of these days, and he doesn't know everyone. And again, and that's most people don't, unless it's their job. A lot of the newer analysts, of course, a lot of the former fighters who become analysts, they're more on the ball with all that stuff. They know everyone, because you can tell they're still fresh, they enjoy it, and again, they're just a little closer to the game, right? But someone like Rogan, who has said, I plan to be more hands off, I want to be more hands off. Well, it's apparent in his work, unfortunately.
Let me throw out a commentary dream team your way. 3-man booth: Joe Rogan, Stephen A. Smith, Brendan Schaub. I guess the commentary booth was so good, we lost Alex. Technical difficulties. Alex, are you there? I guess it's just me. I guess we'll just wait for Alex to come back. So thanks for tuning in. Oh, and then Tim Bissell, if you're still watching, I saw an email saying you subscribed on YouTube. So appreciate that, man. Every subscriber helps, and on this journey to getting a bigger YouTube channel. So appreciate you, my man, if you're still watching. As we continue to wait for Alex to come back. Alex's laptop died. He'll be right back with us. So if you are watching live, appreciate you.
Hello.
There we go.
I'm
Are we
sorry.
back?
I am back. I am so sorry. I have a poor, not a faulty, but a worn out laptop battery. I did not have my laptop plugged in. What did I miss, Lucas? What did I miss while I was gone? Oh my gosh.
You tuned out at the right time because I pulled out this insane commentary team 3-man booth, and at first I thought maybe I broke Alex's computer. So let's try one more time. 3-man booth.
I apologize to everyone again. Sorry, I apologize to everyone for that. It won't happen again. I'm plugged in now.
All right, 3-man dream team: Joe Rogan, Stephen A. Smith, Brendan Schaub. Dream team or what?
Lucas, if you had warned, I need a warning that you were going to talk about Stephen A. Smith as much as you have in this episode. I like you. That is the only reason I'm sticking. If this was like Jose Young's or something, I would be gone right now. I would be like, how dare you keep mentioning Stephen A. Smith in my presence? I'm sorry, you said Stephen A. Sorry, say the team again.
So Brendan Schaub, Joe Rogan,
oh,
and SAS. So we don't say his name.
Look, I can complain all I want. Let me tell you something. That broadcast team, that would get you some ratings. That would get people talking. That would make a lot of memes. I mean, the memes would be endless. I mean, and for us in the MMA media, I mean, we love that stuff. So I can't complain about that. I was about to say you need a former fighter in there, and I'm like, oh, Schaub, you got Schaub. So, the dream team. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if I use the word dream, but it's certainly a team that a lot of people would actually like tune in to watch. Like, it's weird to say they would tune in for a broadcast team, but again, based on the podcast numbers and Schaub's comedy numbers, there's an audience out there to hear those guys talk about fights.
Yeah, I don't know if necessarily the people that watch Brendan Schaub's comedy is necessarily the people that want tuning in, but I mean, yeah, it would get some memes. I mean, could you imagine the people shouting and interrupting each other? Brendan Schaub changing his mind when Joe Rogan disagrees with him. I mean, we could have some interesting stuff for sure.
And then one Mr. ESPN just chiming in with just those brilliant takes, just firing off takes, just like, oh my gosh, kill me. I mean it, kill me if that happens.
The cool thing is he'd be yelling stuff and he'd be very confident about it. So the people watching who don't really know, they'd be like, well, I mean, if Stephen A's so shouting about it, it must be correct.
I never really thought of it that way. It's quite a take on it.
Yeah. What an interesting way to spin this story in a way that doesn't make any sense.
Lucas, I don't want to hear about this guy anymore. I'm not going to bring it up.
All right. Moving on to something else, I guess, since we're not allowed to talk about Mr. Stephen A. Smith. Max Kellerman.
Is your next question actually? If we're going to discuss it, I'll discuss it. Is your next question actually about him?
No, unless you want it to be. If you want it to be, we'll make it happen.
No, if the people asked about it, then I'll talk about it, because we do not, we do not defy the people. The people tell us what to do.
If you're watching this broadcast, please ask a Stephen A. Smith question.
But then we will talk about it. Yes.
Literally, just put a question mark next to his name. It doesn't matter. Stephen spelled incorrectly, we'll take it. So if you're watching, I am counting on you.
Just Stephen. We'll assume you're talking about him, and then we'll discuss him.
All right. So something else, a very serious topic. Israel Adesanya's coach went out there and talked about the possibility of seeing a fight with Stipe Miocic. Is that realistic at all?
Looks like I blacked for a second there. I'm sorry. What was the question? Who's Stipe Miocic versus who?
Adesanya versus Miocic. Is it realistic?
Oh gosh. Oh, that's why I blacked out. Okay, that's why.
That makes sense.
Adesanya said he's willing to go up to heavyweight to fight Stipe. Oh, sorry, the coach said that, and then Adesanya himself, they also said John Jones or something, like he would chase John Jones up there. I would love to see Adesanya fight at heavyweight at some point. I think it would be cool, but I do think we're a little bit past those. Like, who was the last person who made that kind of jump at this level? Like either at a Bellator or a UFC or even like a one championship, maybe Ryzen. But for someone to go from such a low weight class up to heavyweight, it screams freak show, which I love, and which is why I think it won't happen. I don't picture a world where we actually see Adesanya and Stipe Miocic step into the cage together. But then again, I was also the person who said I will never see Floyd Mayweather fight Conor McGregor. So, take my prediction for what it's worth. And
by the way, shout out to you for the way you pronounce his last name. I mean,
I'm working on it. Yeah.
It's weird because it's almost like you have to sneeze. It's like Israel Adesanya. No, it's weird, but
I'll very quickly say I'm not someone like I work very hard to pronounce things, but I'll also say I don't begrudge people when they pronounce people's names wrong, or at least sorry if they kind of anglicize it, because I think people don't realize you're probably doing that with more athletes than you even know. A lot of athletes from Russia, I don't think we're pronouncing their names like they're supposed to be pronounced, but we just kind of, it's easier for us. It's easier for the pronunciation we're used to. So, I mean, with guys like Israel, I do try and, when I hear him say, oh, this is how I pronounce my name and it's how it should be done, then I do try and like do it, but I still call him Adesanya all the time. Like if I'm in conversation, like it's hard not to, right? So I don't think it's the worst thing in the world for some people. If you're a broadcaster, then, maybe that's a different story, but guys like John Anik, they do a great job.
Oh yeah, for sure. And as someone who apparently has a complicated last name, said exactly how it's spelled, and people like to throw in letters in there. Grandsire becomes Grand Desire. There's some that will.
Oh, I like that.
We'll take it. I mean, I'm not about to complain about Grand Desire.
No, that's great.
But people like to throw in H and stuff, so you get used to it. Don't hold it against people.
Yeah.
But in terms of, is this fight realistic? I mean, look at how skinny Israel is. And people are already talking about how skinny he is in fighting. Even Derek Brunson, people are like, oh, skinny guy against Derek. I mean, he's 6'4", so he's got some size on him. But, people were talking about how small he looks compared to middleweights, compared to Romero. Now we talk about him fighting John Jones, who's also a behemoth in his own right. And now you've got Stipe, where you add in 6'4", and he's thick. He's a thick boy. So, on top of it, it's like, how is that realistic? Him going to 205 already doesn't seem realistic. So you want to talk about 265. And the thing is, you could say, well, what if he does a bulk, goes to the gym, tries to add on muscle? Then that changes the way he fights. He's quick. He's got his feints and everything. You start weighing yourself down. And, people argued John Jones versus OSP got a little bit thicker, got a little bit bigger, and it changed his performance. So Israel packing on the pounds to make it at 265 would definitely change things. So is it realistic? No. I think it's one of those things where you want to create a headline, you want to get your name out there, attach it to fighters that are up there, and I think that's what we're seeing in this case.
Yeah, I don't want to see him with that Anderson Silva light heavyweight gut that we saw when he fought Stephen Bonner and Forrest Griffin. It's like, I remember when Anderson Silva went up to 205, we're like, oh, he looks big. But then you kind of looked at him like, he looks big, but rounder than he does at 185. And it was getting a little belly. And now we're talking, right, going up 2 weight classes. I don't want to know. I mean, I could see him adding on a bit of muscle, but it really would just kind of be him letting himself go a little bit to make, I think you'd have to make 20, I guess just you'd make 206, right? To fight a heavyweight fight. I guess it's not that bad, but I think it's just talk for now. I think it's just talk ahead of the Romero fight because he has so many fights left to take it 185. I think a lot of compelling bouts. So as much as I love freak show fights, and I think it'd be cool if guys jump between weight classes more, and we just had fun with it. This is one situation where I think Izzy needs to stay where he is.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. I don't think there's too much more to add. One thing, since I'm in France, we got to talk a little bit about French MMA. We've got this promotion, or I guess I could call it a local promotion, Aries FC, signing all of these veterans, signing names and everything. What is this organization ceiling? They're talking like they're going to rival the UFC and stuff. I mean, and I'm as a promoter, I want to hear you be confident. But what is this promotion ceiling?
I mean, I think the ceiling is it could become. Well, I mean, when you consider that it's obviously, I know France is just now sort of making advances in the legislation of MMA. If it just wants to be, if its goal is to become the biggest promotion in France, I mean, I think that's pretty good, right? Now I don't know how, like I said, that might be a low bar. I'm not sure.
It's extreme. It's like a phone book. I mean, it's really, you don't get that much lower.
But I mean, if they want to be a promotion that operates out of France and also visits some other places in Europe, holds some other big shows like that, then I think that's certainly doable as long as they keep that as their goal and not immediately start thinking like, oh, okay, well, we've got a star and whoever they get, let's try and go over it. Let's try and hold a show in the US, or let's try and hold a show in Asia or something. It's like, no, stick with France, right? Stick with France. Build out an audience. I think you want to go almost like Cage Warriors model. I think that would be a good ceiling. And I would say though, focus on kind of stuff that the UFC doesn't want, which is what we're seeing with, of course, signing these flyweights, like guys like John Moraga. John Moraga they signed recently. I think he's still a top 10, like one of the top 10 best flyweights in the world. And obviously the UFC just doesn't want him. So I think building a strong flyweight division is huge. Signing mega prospects like Rug, that goes without saying. And that's one the UFC, again, a guy the UFC is not going to touch at this stage in his career. So more power to you, Aries, for finding this diamond in the rough and bring him into the world and introducing us to a guy who may already be the pound for pound greatest fighter in the sport.
Big expectations. As somebody that's in school for marketing, the big thing they tell you is to find a market that is untapped, and
Hmm.
well, obviously tap into it, and that's what they're doing. I mean, for Fernan Lopez, there we go, was saw that there's no promotion here in France, so he takes advantage of it. Now he's doing a show. I think next one's in Brussels and things like that. So, if you're gonna try to go head to head with like a Cage Warriors, and you want to go against that sort of UK, Great Britain sort of the fans, it's not really going to work. But in terms of, nobody does anything in Belgium, nobody does anything in France, things like that. That's a good way to start. And they're signing the right guys. I mean, Juan Adams, let's be honest, why is he there? Eventually, he's probably going to fight Rug. And let's be honest, we're all going to tune in for that one because that's going to be insane. So they're doing things right. They're signing big names. I mean, if you're a casual, you probably don't know them. But, for people that are like, why should I tune in? If you start to recognize names here and there, you're definitely going to tune in. So they're doing things intelligently in terms of their ceiling. Not Bellator, maybe PFL at the most, but PFL has sort of that gimmick with the tournaments and things like that, and the fact they were attached to World Series of Fighting, which makes them kind of legit. But maybe Cage Warriors, but it's like you mentioned, if you try to go head to head with the UFC, if you're trying to go head to head with Cage Warriors in England, that's not the way to go. But you keep going to these markets that nobody else is going, finding prospects like Rug, and it looks like with the English media, they're doing a good job of, getting guys interested. And it looks like a lot of people are going to be going over to Belgium. So for me, they're doing things the right way in terms of ceiling. Maybe Cage Warriors, maybe PFL, but in terms of, they talk, we're going to rival the UFC, we're going to rival Bellator, probably not. Maybe Bellator Europe, you look at some of their shows and it's not great, but but they do have a ceiling that if they continue this business model, it could be very interesting for them.
I think really the best case would be something like KSW, but that's such a hard thing to get because I mean, based on what you're saying, I haven't kept up as much with this Aries marketing side as I should have probably. Well, obviously I don't think they're going to be competition, but I think it also sounds like they don't want to be a feeder league. Cage Warriors has kind of proudly become like, they'll go like, oh, look at all these guys we sent to the
Well,
UFC.
actually, if I don't mean to cut you off, but one
Go ahead,
thing Lopez did say it was that I think there's a clause in their contract that if the UFC wants to scoop up their guy, you can do it. So
sure.
I guess so they might be a little bit of a feeder league
Yeah.
and tapping into that.
They're open to it, which is good. I wonder how much they want to want to do that if there actually is like 3 or 4 of their big guys get taken. But it's certainly a good thing to do for fighter relations. I think it will allow a lot of talent to come in. It's probably why some of these name flyweights have been willing to sign there, is because like, oh, okay, good. I might be signing like a 3 or 4 fight deal, but should things go my way and I get the call back to the UFC, I can go back. So yeah, if they don't want to be a feeder league, or maybe they do, but and also I don't think they can be competition. KSW is like right in that sweet spot, but it's hard because KSW kind of has all these bodybuilders and Olympians and athletes that are willing to and strongmen guys, so they kind of have this weird athlete celebrity base to draw from, as well as actual good, really good fighters. And also Poland's just kind of this crazy MMA hotbed right now. They have like 2 or 3 promotions, and they're all kind of doing different things and appealing to fans in different ways. So I can't compare the Poland market to the France market, but that would be really awesome if they could do something like KSW, where they're not quite a feeder, but they're kind of their own thing, and they can sort of be the big dog in their own yard.
Yeah, it's definitely smart, the UFC clause, because how many times have we heard of prospects and managers putting out there like, oh, we got the UFC offer, we couldn't do it, make sure you don't sign with them. Yep. In this case, you're like, well, every fighter realistically wants to go to the UFC, so you're like, why not sign with them if I'm getting paid correctly and I have this opportunity to be on the UFC? They're also on UFC Fight Pass, so they're doing things right. But if you're on Fight Pass, if you're willing to send guys to UFC, you're obviously not going to surpass the UFC, right? That's not how you do it. But for me, I'm surprised by how quickly they're doing things. And if they can up their production value and make it look really good, that for me, we were looking at a promotion that could potentially make some waves.
Yeah, look, I hate to do, be a glorified PR man for certain promotions, but I always like to tell fans, try new things. If you just want to watch the UFC, that's great. Of course, it's a familiar product. The best of the best fighters are still up there. But I always say, watch Bellator, watch the PFL, watch KSW, watch One, Ryzen, watch Aries. You know what I mean? Just see what's out there. You might not like it. You might watch one of these promotions and be like, oh, well, it's not the UFC. I'm going back to the UFC, and that's fine. But just realize there's a lot of different MMA out there. a lot of it free even, or again, available on UFC Fight Pass, which you're probably, if you're already ordering, give it a shot. Just try new things. I don't want to stand for any particular promotion, but just to say, other than all those promotions in general, give it a shot. There's so much fun MMA out there, and guys who, will be could be in the UFC someday, and you could say you saw them before they got there.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of that. I think a lot of people, they tend to fault you if you're just UFC, but the big thing I saw through one of my friends, who I guess you can call him a casual, he was watching Bellator with me, and he was like, "So what is this, like amateur, beneath the UFC?" And the main thing, and I was trying to understand, like, why he's saying that, and it's the production value. It doesn't feel like you're watching as high profile as the UFC. So I'm not going to be mad at you if you don't watch anything other than UFC. That's on you. I'm not about to tell you how to enjoy something. But yeah, definitely, give stuff a shot, especially if you do like MMA. You could catch some good things. And I don't know how many times I've watched a smaller show, and then you look at a guy and you're like, this could be an interesting prospect. And before you know it, he's in UFCs and Bellator and doing things. But I don't want to make it sound like I'm standing for this promotion just because I'm in France. But you definitely want to give props when people are doing things right in this circumstance. All right, moving on to another subject, we have Dan Hooker, Paul Felder, with sort of this weird beef, and people are getting kind of excited for it. Who do you have in this main event in New Zealand?
Oh, I haven't done my predictions yet, which is probably a good thing because it means I can sort of futz around with this answer. This is a close fight. I think this is, lightweight, it's no secret, is like the deepest division in the UFC, and these guys are right in that spot of they're in the top 10. I don't know if they're ranked. Where are they ranked? Oh, sorry, they're ranked like 6 and 7 actually. If I'm talking about the official rankings, they're like right next to each other. So they're right up there, close to that top 5. And like based on their previous fights, I could not tell you really who has a leg up here. I'm probably leaning towards Felder, but that's just because the Barboza fight is like sticking out a little bit more in my mind than Hooker's last fight. But Hooker was dominant against Iaquinta, more so than Felder was against Barboza. I just remember the Felder fight more for some reason, probably because I just rewatched it this week. So again, I'm leaning towards Felder. I say that with zero confidence. I say that with zero, like, oh, well, this part of Felder's style is perfect for Hooker. No, Hooker is an amazing striker. And Felder's all pressure is definitely going to try and put it on him. Definitely try and negate, Hooker's kicks, negate any sort of reach advantage that Hooker might have. But boy, man, when you're aggressive against a guy like Hooker, that's how you end up getting head kicked, right? So my only thing I'll say is I think the fight will go to decision. So I'll make at least a prediction that I don't see either guy finishing the other, and that it'll be Felder winning a decision.
Yeah, I think it's definitely going to be a great fight, and even the buildup is kind of surprising. I mean, Paul Felder made a Hooker joke, which I feel like if you're a fighter and you have to do the corny trash talk, you have to do that. Like, it's right there for the taking. Take it, damn it. And he did. Hooker did sort of reminds me a little bit of Michael Chiesa, like, don't talk about my mom, and he's like, don't talk about my family name. But so the buildup is interesting, and stylistically it's a great fight. And now you've got a little bit of a story to go with it, a little sprinkle on the top to make you want to watch it. In terms of who's going to win, I mean, the Barboza fight, I think, with Dan Hooker is the biggest one, where it makes people kind of because that was his opportunity to show you that he was at the top, and you saw what Barboza did to him. I mean, that was really, you finished it, and you're like, damn, what the hell was Hooker doing out there? And Hooker's beating some good guys.
Yeah.
Obviously the Iaquinta fight was very good, but Iaquinta hasn't been quite as good out there recently. Felder had that fight against Barboza. I didn't necessarily have it for Felder, although I'd have to rewatch it to, really try to just score it. But, I'm leaning towards Hooker. I'm going to be a little bit different on this one. I think if he can use his length, if his gas tank looks good over 5 rounds. But this definitely seems like the kind of fight where we're going to see like a split decision, 48-47, 47-48, and all that stuff. And we're going to have all these great debates over Twitter, and we're going to go after the judges one more time and then question, like, is it time to abandon the judges and have them fight for the death? But it's for sure going to be a great fight.
If by a great debate on Twitter, we've had great debates today. If by great debate on Twitter, you mean people calling a close fight a robbery, regardless of how competitive it was.
No. We don't include those people.
And then questioning each other's knowledge and manhood. Yes, then I expect a great debate on Twitter. But no, but no, I think you're right, though. I think there will be some discussion after, because like I said, I think they're so evenly matched that I think fans of Felder are going to, feel one way about it. I think fans of Hooker are going to feel one way about it. And there might just be impartial fans either way who just feel like complaining regardless of who wins. So, yeah, I'll just say it's going to be an entertaining fight. That's the other prediction I'm going to make. One, I think it'll go the distance, and two, that I think it'll be a really, really, really good main event. And kudos to the matchmakers for just putting this one together for the people in Auckland.
I'll tell you what, after everything that happened at Houston, people are going to be waiting for that hometown cooking. People are going to be right there in front of the TV, like, I'm just waiting for that judge to mess up. So, but if you can't trust the judges at this point, who can you trust? So hopefully they get this one right, and we don't have to watch everybody go after each other because, I didn't read the unified rules like I should have, and I have no idea what I'm talking about. So, but at the same time, if people don't question each other's manhood on MMA Twitter, are you even on MMA Twitter?
Yeah, what is it for?
Correctly. You go at people's throats, damn it. If they disagree with you, who do you think you are, man? You think you're better than me? No way.
Lucas, I see why you're a fan of SAS now. I'll say that.
No, I haven't yelled at you yet, and then told you just how clear I am, and then told you why you were wrong. So, I'm just holding it back just a little bit. But also on the subject of being very, very clear, I'm not necessarily a Stephen A. Smith fan. Let me just put that out there. I'm not watching his videos or anything. We debated it, but since we do have about 5 minutes left and we have some people watching, let's talk a little bit about Stephen A. Smith and about what we saw. I mean, we have to. I feel like there are too many strong opinions on this one. So without asking a question, just give us your thoughts on Stephen A. Smith and then Stephen A. Smith in MMA.
Stephen A. Smith is a guy who works really, really hard. He's developed an awesome persona for himself as far as the current media landscape goes, as far as how to get attention, how to create headlines, how to make yourself really a very viable TV personality, right? There's a reason. I thought about this when I was watching him at Almost Ruined, the NBA celebrity game. Because I love basketball. It's probably my favorite sport, along with MMA. It's like equal. And I was like, you know what? This guy, though, as much as I might disdain for him, like I said, he shows up. This guy, when he's called to show up and put on that personality, I don't know how much of it is an act, but even if whether it's an act or not, it looks exhausting. Yeah. And this guy is on that just all the time, just constantly. I bet he has people walking up to him in the airport, probably going like, "Oh, Stephen A, give me what are this guy's catchphrases? Whatever, give me one of your Stephen A. What is his catchphrases? What does he say?"
See, you're trying to trap me right now. You want me to pull out all these catchphrases? No, I'm not a big fan.
Give us a take, Steve. What do you think about my team? Whatever, my sports team. What do you think? How do you think they're going to do this year? How do you think they do this week? What do you think about that game the other day? And they're probably just like constantly. So I always commend the guy for the hard work. There's a lot of personalities in sports, MMA, NBA, NHL, whatever. Skip
and Shannon. Well, we're throwing
Skip
out
and Shannon.
personalities and everything.
Sure. And oh god, Skippy, that's another guy. And again, they work hard, but I like I said, what bothers me about guys like Stephen A is I do feel like they don't always do their research, and they don't have to because they're not asked for in-depth analysis. They're asked for a very surface level take, and they deliver that. And if that's what fans want, that's what fans want. But I always feel like guys like Stephen A, and I think MMA fans who are unfamiliar with him side in the wake of the Cerrone thing, these are takes that I think take away from the understanding and the enjoyment of certain sports. I really, really firmly believe that. People might say I have a stick up my butt, not to take it too seriously. I know all sports are games. I understand they're all entertainment, but I also think that there's some brilliant writers out there and brilliant analysts who really enrich the sport that they cover. And I don't think he's one of them. I actually do think he takes away from what he covers. So I don't enjoy the man's work. It's nothing personal. I don't know him. He might be the nicest, most professional guy in the world behind the scenes. He might, be a great charitable man. But just as far as his personality goes, the on-screen personality, the public persona, not a fan. Not a fan of him. Not a fan of guys like that. Hot take guys. I'll never be one of those guys, even though I try to be a little more provocative, just to get, like anyone, just to get a little more attention and get my name out there, right? That's why you brought me on, Lucas, right? For my spicy takes.
Yeah, exactly. There we go.
And if I didn't have them, I wouldn't even be here. So, but no, I always preach moderation, and guys like Stephen A. Smith are certainly the opposite of that.
Yeah, Stephen A. Smith. I like how you started off, he's a great guy, works very hard and everything. So, but yeah, I mean, give him the credit. He's very well paid. He works very hard. Mm-hmm. I feel like people are getting exhausted of seeing him absolutely everywhere. That's where a lot of those memes come from. But what I do have to say is that, I'm also a very big basketball fan myself. And being in France, the coverage is, it's not like in the States. So sometimes you'll see like a debate topic on First Take and you just can't help but click it. You're like today I was watching, what's his name? We just went to the Clippers, Reggie Jackson. So I was curious, like, what do they say? I feel like Stephen A. Smith isn't bringing me anything new. I feel like if I went on First Take, just right off the top of the dome, like, hey, Lucas, this happened. Oh, and I just told you, I yelled at you. What I thought, that would bring the same thing as Stephen A. Smith. And that's where it's unfortunate, because sometimes that's why I'm with the Athletic, and I read their MMA stuff, NBA, and I really like when they have like an in-depth analysis, and I feel like coming out of it, I learned something, especially tactics wise and everything. Right now, people, they talk about, for example, the Houston Rockets and their small ball, and I feel like with Stephen A. Smith, I haven't learned anything that I couldn't have figured out all by myself. It's him shouting, it's him giving you these takes, but he's not bringing anything that you didn't already know. What we saw with the Cowboy Cerrone and the Conor McGregor fight, you almost feel like you didn't even watch it. You feel like you watched a quick clip of the finish on Twitter and then told you like, oh man, that man just gave up. And the big thing I was saying when we did talk about that topic on the show was, MMA isn't the same fan base as NBA. Well, obviously this one, it's not a good example with us two, but NFL, MLB, those people, those aren't the same. MMA fans are not necessarily sports fans. And you start coming after a fighter, you say that he quit and things like that, and people don't respect your opinion in MMA. You're playing with fire right there, and that's why everybody came after him. I mean, people are like, let him do his hot takes in the NBA. You start bringing that over here in our sport, that's where you're gonna have problems. So yeah, that's my take on Stephen A. Smith. Not a huge fan. Disclaimer, his catchphrase, I know some, sometimes it's fun, Stephen A. Smith. There's some good impersonations out there, but yeah, I feel like in terms of him, covering the UFC some more, no, thank you. I mean, he might be for the casual fan, but he's not bringing them anything they couldn't have figured out by looking at exactly what Stephen A. Smith just watched.
Well, I'll tell you, right? Look, this ESPN UFC relationship is still young. It's almost, it's not just beginning, but it is still young. So we will be seeing a lot more of Stephen A. Smith's takes on MMA. And I think anyone who's seen his takes on boxing are horrible. I think he's commentated boxing fights, which is just insane and insane to me. But yes, heaven help us, Lucas. There will come a day where I think they actually will have him in the broadcast booth. And boy, that's going to be a rough one. That's going to be one of those days where if I did not work in MMA, I would skip that show. I'll tell you that right now. So again, no, I wish no ill will upon the man, and I wish him the best. And I kind of have to, because we'll be seeing a lot more of him.
And people were talking about, why didn't they just have Max Kellerman on? He knows boxing and everything. And so I was like, okay, why not? And then he talks to John Jones in what was an awful interview. I don't know if you saw it. And he's talking about how great Khabib's striking is, which I thought was a little bit unfortunate, considering, you're a boxing guy. Like, if you don't know striking, who knows striking? So, at first I was like, okay, maybe Max. And then he says some stuff like that. I'm like, okay, well, damn it, not Max either then. Who, in this case, at ESPN, would you trust with the UFC?
Oh God! Oh wow! God, I don't know if I know their roster that well. Now, the sad thing is, the names I know are guys like Stephen A. Smith and them that are out there. Gosh, who is there? Aside from, of course, our my former colleague like Ariel Helwani, but even he would tell you he's not an analyst. Ariel will tell you that his job is not to analyze fights. He's never been one to do that. He's a great interview guy. It's what he's done. It's what he's done for years. He's great at outlining narratives, things like that. I think you need like a Chael Sonnen, but they have him out there too. He's been out there. I think he's been doing a great job. The man wears many hats. Analyst is certainly one of them. He's prone to hyperbole, but I think if you ask him to break things down, again, they just got to stick really with the UFC employed guys. I know it'd be cool if ESPN had someone in house, but when you have UFC guys like Cormier and Dominic Cruz and Paul Felder and them available to break things down, you got to stick with that, right? Maybe someone comes along for ESPN, like a broadcaster who's done that, who can step in and be both like someone who can analyze fights without necessarily having been in there. But otherwise, I think you really want to rely on. I don't think there's that nerd corner of MMA yet that can be trusted, that we've seen in some other sports. Especially since it's not a sport that can be broken down to statistics. Yeah. So you don't have those kind of same guys who do like brilliant work for like baseball and the NBA and the NFL, because there's no room for that in MMA. There's no stats to break down. There's no angle for someone to go in there and say, well, fighters wouldn't see it this way because they don't see these numbers. I'm like, there are no numbers that can show you more than a fighter knows right now. I don't think so anyway.
Yeah, that's where it's complicated, because you can't just ask somebody who's used to covering regular sports come in and cover MMA, especially considering that the fan base, they're waiting for you. They're at your throats. Like, go ahead, make a mistake, say something stupid. We're waiting for you.
Oh yeah.
So yeah, if you don't bring out a guy like Chael who's ready to fight back against those guys, it's going to be real complicated, especially because in MMA, I feel like nobody's going to trust someone that doesn't have some kind of qualification. Like they do know this sport, and back off of me while I try to talk about it.
Yeah, I'll just say this. So I don't mean to put an end on this, I guess, but I am kind of done talking about Stephen A. Smith as much as I can because I want to end on a positive note. You know, when I say there's other voices out there that are interesting to listen to, like I think of, I'm just going to just because I wanted this on a positive note. I want to shout out a bunch of people like who I think are great, and I'm leaving people out, but of course, you know, you mentioned a lot of the writers of The Athletic. You know, people I used to work with, of course, Sean Al-Shadi, I think is great. Chuck Mindenhall, a friend of mine, Fernanda Plachis. You know, I think she's a great voice, certainly a unique voice in this field. Ben Folks, an MMA junkie. Luke Thomas, who I also used to work with. I still enjoy his show. I know he's a love it or hate it guy because he's out there. He has strong opinions, but I think his fight analysis is great, whether you agree with it or not. I think it's always worth watching his breakdowns of fights. And again, just to see if maybe you think he's right, maybe you think he's wrong, but just to kind of get that breakdown for it. There's a lot of great voices out there. Like I said, a lot of the UFC fighters who do work on the broadcast, I think they do such a good job. So I would just tell people, like, I don't like tell people who not to listen to, but I would just say there's a lot of good minds in MMA. It's still a young field. MMA media is still a growing field. But I think people like, you know, Lucas, like yourself, like me, hopefully, like some of the people I work with at MMA, a lot of the great, brilliant people I work with at MMA fighting. I like to think that, you know, we're pushing things forward. It might seem a little slow at times and fans might not always be down with what we're doing. But, you know, just have some faith with us and in us and enjoy the ride, I would say.
100%. One person I want to shout out also that I feel, you know, at first people weren't sure about him, but Brian Campbell, I feel like he's done a great job.
Yep.
You know, morning combat. They do a really good, you know, I like Luke Thomas. And, you know, just because you like someone doesn't mean you need to agree with every take. But what I like is even if he gives you a take you don't agree with, he's ready to argue about it. You know, he's got something well planned.
You can back it up.
Right. Like you mentioned, there's definitely some good voices. Fernanda, unfortunately, we saw her podcast came to an end.
Yeah,
I think we were all devastated. I mean, I saw it. I started reading it like, unfortunately, it's goodbye. Wait, what? Nah. So, but shout out to all the people that do great work. Lots of good content out there. And hopefully someday this podcast will be part of like the content that, you know, people look at like, you know, it was quite something in its heyday.
Yes, and when that day does come, I'll be happy to have said I was on one of the earlier episodes. So that's very exciting for me as well. And by the way, the Brian Campbell thing, I just want to say when we first had him on as a member on the MMA Hour, not the MMA Hour, I'm sorry. Oh my goodness. The MMA Beat. Thank you. That's so embarrassing. Yes, the MMA Beat with Luke. I think right away, I remember the first episode I watched them. I'm like, these guys have a great chemistry. And this guy has like just the kind of personality to kind of get under Luke's skin. Yeah. But not like annoy him. You know what I mean? Not like in like a pesky way, but like just in a way that they clearly come from different ideologies. And yet are both credible. And I remember thinking like, man, they'd be great. I think it's more of these two would be great. So it's very cool that they ended up getting their own show. So yeah, it was a morning combat for sure. I tell people to check that out. And again, MMA fighting, we're still the best. I got to, of course. I don't want my editors to be mad at me. I'd say support our own stuff, of course.
100%. Lots of good stuff on this episode. I feel like we had so many controversial topics compared to some past episodes. So thank you so much for joining me, man. I appreciate it. Let the people know, where can we find you on social media one more time, and also what projects you have coming up. If there's anything that you want to share.
Just look me up on Twitter at Alexander K. Lee. The K stands for quality, of course, quality of spelling, you know, specifically. And always look for my work at MMAfighting.com. This week, I think either tomorrow or Friday, I will be dropping another robbery review. I really need to wish I had named it something differently because it's so hard to say. I did one for Dominic Reyes and John Jones, looking at not just my opinion, because my opinion is whatever. I don't know how to judge a fight, but my opinion plus, you know, stats from MMA decisions and Verdict MMA, plus, you know, what did the judges say and why do I think they might have said that? So kind of trying to look at it as objectively as possible and deciding whether something is a robbery. This case, nothing crazy happened in Rio Rancho. So I'm looking back at Paul Felder's fight with Barbosa from 242. And try and decide, because there was a lot of debate after that fight, and try and decide whether it was a robbery or not. And I won't spoil it. Just check out the article when it drops to find out for yourself.